Hello again, YouTube family. Thanks for watching this video. As you can tell by the graphic to my left, this video is dealing partially with Joe Manchin and his obstructionism of the Democrat Party's agenda so far during the Biden administration. And one of the reasons why I'm making this video is having a discussion with my brother. He had brought up that he believes I'm radical because I'm not buying into Joe Manchin's BS, which struck me as odd. Because the BS of Joe Manchin, to me, seems so obvious. And let's dig into this. Joe Manchin claims he wants bipartisanship from the same Republicans who have been yelling since 2008 that they will absolutely not support Democratic legislation. The COVID stimulus bill that was very much needed, beyond needed, it mirrored the two very same bills Republicans had already passed. Not one Republican voted for it. Joe Manchin claims his obstructionism with the Democrat Party's legislation is there's something wrong with it when so few Republicans support it. However, he voted for the COVID stimulus bill and 0 Republicans supported it. So, you have the voting rights bill that's in Congress right now, in the Senate right now, S1. It was HR 1 in the House, it's S1 in the Senate, and it's For the People Act. And it does a lot of things to help voting. It does a lot of things to take a lot of corruption out of politics. Joe Manchin just came out this past weekend on Sunday and said he's not supporting it. His excuse for saying he's not supporting it is they need bipartisanship. The bills are too partisan. And he's saying that when so few Republicans support it, there must be a problem with the bill. This is the same guy who voted for a bill already that had 0 Republican support. The January 6th Commission Democrats tried to set up, including all the pieces Republicans wanted, failed. Filibustered. One journalist noted, trying to grasp Joe Manchin's motives is like trying to see the bottom of a mud puddle. Why does Joe Manchin's mouth seem like it is detached from reality? Because of money. The thing that drives politicians so often, regardless of party, is money. The private equity firms that heavily donate to Joe Manchin were able to convert to C Corps and benefit greatly from the Republican tax cuts of 2017. Law firms are in the same boat. They were able to become limited liability partnerships, LLPs, and benefit from the pass-through loophole in the 2017 tax bill the Republicans passed. It is no coincidence these industries greatly benefit from the current tax structure, greatly donate to Joe Manchin's campaign. I'll get into that here in a minute. And now Manchin is staunchly obstructing Democrat legislation that would threaten those tax benefits. As I said, he stated on Sunday he would oppose the For the People Act. He also is in opposition to the infrastructure bill. He is concerned by the total lack of Republican support for legislation. Another person, a lawyer who knows Manchin, who is from West Virginia, had talked about, and this is a guy who is a friend of Manchin, a supporter of Manchin, who was trying to say that Joe Manchin, and when he was governor in West Virginia, was able to get legislation passed, and one of his quotes was, "Few, if any, of these high-profile bills changed much in the state." And that's the key. Joe Manchin has a very similar modus operandi to Republicans. And that is, they are not going to fundamentally change the lives of average people, because they're worried about a small group of people who put money in their pockets. Joe Manchin's top 3 donors are the finance, insurance, and real estate industry. Almost $2.5 million they donated to him. Energy and natural resources, over $2 million donated to him. Lawyers and lobbyists, almost $2 million donated to him. Since 2015, his 2 biggest donor industries are securities and investments, and lawyers, law firms. And that's where the crux is. The 2017 tax bill cut taxes for corporations, and one of the reasons why you have this oddity of lawyers being a major donor to him, and he is not the only Democrat who has massive support from law firms who became LLPs after the 2017 tax cuts, because the pass-through loophole gave them massive tax benefits. And Joe Manchin recently had these entities, the donors who donate large amounts of money to his campaign, putting pressure on him in his state. Now, with the COVID relief bill that he voted for, despite any Republican support, this guy who claims that he only wants to support legislation that's bipartisan, and he voted for the COVID relief bill. That is, Kamala Harris went to West Virginia and went on television putting pressure on Joe Manchin to pass this bill. The COVID relief bill had nearly 90% support nationwide. I mean, that is insanely popular. It's so difficult to have legislation that has that broad of support nationwide. It was massively popular in West Virginia. And Kamala Harris went on television in West Virginia, made Joe Manchin mad. He made the comment, he don't know why she didn't give him a heads up she was going there, because she's a grown woman and she don't have to give anybody a heads up she's going to go on a TV station in anybody's state. But she went to his state, put pressure on him, and he caved immediately and supported the legislation. Joe Manchin wasn't outwardly opposing the For the People Act. He was not outwardly opposing the infrastructure bill. And then the donors, who are afraid their money might be affected, put pressure on him, and suddenly he's on television on Sunday saying, I will not support the infrastructure bill, I will not support the For the People Act. And then coming out and saying he will not support any changes to the filibuster. Another big piece of that, which Joe Manchin had previously said that we need to go back to a talking filibuster. That if a party's going to filibuster, it needs to be painful for them to do. They need to be required again to stand up and talk nonstop for hours on end to filibuster. He's backed away from that. Why? Because the people who put money in his pockets told him, stop it. Go out now and oppose it. He went out immediately to oppose it on television. That's how so many of these politicians are controlled. And you need to understand that when you see a politician on television, that's a very planned maneuver. It's politics. It's playing politics. It's damage control. It's trying to control a narrative. And Joe Manchin, to his credit, is very political. He plays the political game. He will go on television and gaslight people. I'm assuming that's why my brother's falling for his idea that we need bipartisanship. And would I like for both parties to support legislation that helps people? Sure. I would love that. Are we going to get that? No. No. But that is Joe Manchin. That is not only Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. There's at least 10 other Democrats in the Senate that 100% get money from the same people they do and pressure from the same people they do. You have some Democrats in the Senate who are hiding behind Joe Manchin, saying, you get up there and you oppose it, that way I can just sit back and let it fail. And as far as the Voting Rights Act, there are a lot of things in there to make voting easier. Republicans don't want that to pass, because if voting is easier, Republicans have a harder time getting elected. If more people find it easy to cast a vote, higher vote counts benefit Democrats. Lower vote counts benefit Republicans. That's why we have things working the way they are. You have Republicans in state after state who are not just proposing, passing very restrictive voting bills. They are throwing up as many hurdles as they can to vote, to try and keep as many people from voting as they possibly can. There's a reason for that. And that is they don't want those people to vote. And Joe Manchin is claiming that there are 10 good Republicans that we can work with to fix voting rights. No, you can't. Point them out. You've got Republicans all over the country disenfranchising voters while you're claiming Republicans want to help people be able to vote more easily. Another big part of that voting rights bill was affecting the dark money that people like Joe Manchin take, dark money that people like Mitch McConnell take. And that is the Voting Rights Act that the Democrats passed, the For the People Act, S1, H.R. 1 in the House, S1 in the Senate, required all political donations to be public. Right now, you have political action committees that are completely secretive. Money goes in, the political action committee itself donates to politicians. You know that political action committee is donating to the politicians, but you don't know who the money came from. You have a lot of bad faith actors in this country. Wealthy individuals, wealthy corporations, who are putting money into these dark PACs that are ending up putting the bribe money out to the politicians. Joe Manchin absolutely is a recipient of that. And the people that donate money to him have started putting pressure on him to oppose it, because they don't want their political contributions to be public. They want to keep it private. They don't want you to know how much money they put into Joe Manchin's pocket, or into Chuck Schumer's pocket, or into Mitch McConnell's pocket, or into Ted Cruz's pocket. They don't want you to know that. Certainly, no one who donates to Ted Cruz wants you to know they donated to him. They want to keep that secret. But that's what is going on with Joe Manchin. That's why his mouth doesn't mirror reality. That's why you have Joe Manchin claiming he wants bipartisanship with people who are screaming at him, no bipartisanship. And that is on major legislation. That's on legislation that would impact average people's lives. Most of the legislation that gets passed in Congress, you don't feel in your normal life. And it has bipartisan support. There's plenty of bipartisan support for legislation that the American people aren't going to feel on a regular basis. You know, you had the anti-child sex trafficking bill that went through the House, went through the Senate. Everyone, Republican and Democrat, in the House, except for one, everyone in the Senate, 100%, Republicans and Democrats, voted for it. Most of the legislation that goes through is like that, unless you're involved in child sex trafficking as a victim or a criminal. That really doesn't affect you. Most of the people in this country, that's not going to affect them on their daily life. And that bill will easily have bipartisan support. Nobody wants to say they didn't vote for the anti-child sex trafficking bill, except for one, of course. That's Matt Gaetz, the representative who is allegedly under investigation for violating child sex trafficking laws. Those bills, bipartisan, easily. Tax cuts for wealthy people and corporations, bipartisan. Both parties have plenty of corrupt people that take plenty of bribe money. Both parties will agree to give tax breaks to their donors. But stuff like this, the voting rights bill, that would hamper the ability of politicians to take corrupt bribe money. No Republican wants that for that purpose. Also, it would make it easier to vote. No Republican wants that to pass for that reason. And Joe Manchin is claiming because the Republicans aren't supporting it, he can't support it, which is a BS position. But the voting rights bill would affect massive amounts of people, making it easier for them to vote, changing Washington, making it harder for these corrupt politicians to take the corrupt bribe money. And that's why that legislation is so unpopular. Then the infrastructure bill. You know, Joe Biden started out over $2 trillion for infrastructure. The physical infrastructure in this country is crumbling. You know, you listen to industrial engineers and they will tell you that we've needed infrastructure reform in this country for a long time, to bills to put money into infrastructure, physical infrastructure. I talked recently in a video about the human infrastructure, things like the federal government providing child care for women who want to go into the workplace. You have people who are gaslighting on that right now, claiming that there's a shortage of workers. No, there's not a shortage of workers. There's a shortage of good-paying jobs. There's a shortage of jobs that would pay a living wage. And that's another thing that Joe Biden, or the Joe Manchin, did not support, which was the $15 per hour minimum wage. Joe Manchin himself has interest in numerous businesses in West Virginia, none of which pay an average of $15 per hour. An increase in the minimum wage would affect Joe Manchin directly. The profits he gets from his interest in those businesses. And that's all in the corruption that's going on. You have the bribe money that no Republican and most of the Democrats don't want to lose. And I would question whether Joe Biden actually intended for this stuff to pass. Joe Biden's walking a fine line right now. There is a large percentage of the Democrat base that is well left of Joe Biden, that are very progressive, that want progressive change. Joe Biden's trying to walk that line of being the person he's always been while pandering to the left wing of the party. And it's not working. Joe Biden came into office without a plan to deal with the migrant crisis. He's putting up legislation that looks good, then allowing it to be chopped down to where it's much less. And Joe Manchin is playing a game. And that game is to keep getting all the corrupt bribe money he gets while going on television and saying what sounds really good, that what we need is bipartisanship. Sure, bipartisanship would be great, but you've got the Republican Party whose only legislative interest is making it harder for people to vote and giving tax breaks to corporations and billionaires. And you've got Democrats who propose great legislation only, it seems, when they know it has no chance of passing. So that when it doesn't pass, they can say, well, we tried. And the thing is, they've not tried. Because the Democrats have the ability to do away with the filibuster. They have that ability. They can alter it. They can do away with it. They can change it to where they can get this stuff passed. And people counter that by saying, yeah, but if the Democrats do that, then Republicans can do it. Well, you know, if a majority of the people in this country vote Republicans in, shouldn't they try and pass legislation? I mean, if most of the people in this country who show up to vote for Republicans, put them in the House and the Senate and the White House, I would expect them to try and pass something. I mean, under Trump, it was very little. They wasted the whole first year of Trump's time in office trying to push a dead health care bill they couldn't even get all the Republicans to vote for. And Joe Manchin claims, again, that he can't support the legislation if there's low Republican support for it. However, there is legislation he's voted for that had zero Republican support for it. Because that legislation was needed. If Joe Biden did not pass the COVID stimulus package that, like I said, had almost 90% support across the country, his presidency was dead. His hope for re-election was dead. Probably Kamala Harris, because she's attached to this presidency, her political career was dead if they did not pass that. If they did not get that passed, their political careers were over. I mean, Joe Biden's old. This is the end of his political career, being president. And that's why they were willing to go to West Virginia and put pressure on Joe Manchin. They needed that to pass. That had to pass. And because they're not putting that same pressure on Joe Manchin now, I would question whether Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer actually intend for these other pieces of legislation to pass. We'll see how it plays out. But if you listen to what the politicians are saying on cable news interviews, you're being gaslighted. You've got to look at everything with skepticism. You've got to read about this stuff. And you have to measure words against actions. You got to compare the words and the actions. And if someone's talking like Joe Manchin, like, you know, I'm trying to support bipartisanship, I can't support a bill if it's not bipartisan. When he's supported bills that aren't bipartisan, you know he's full of BS. And if you ask the question, why is he BSing me on this? Like most politicians, it's the money. It's the donors. The donors are wanting something different. For Joe Manchin and a lot of Democrats, they have a lot of support from lawyers because of how much money they were able to save in their law firms with that 2017 tax cut bill from the Republicans. And they donate to both parties, but in 2020, because Donald Trump was so unpopular, his presidency was so abysmal, the Democrats had more corporate donations than the Republicans did, which is usually the other way around. But because so many of the corporate entities felt like Donald Trump was going to get voted out of office, they put money in the Democrats' coffers, figuring they were going to take control. That's what happened. And now what we need are people to push the politicians away from their donors and to doing something that's good for people. The infrastructure bill is good for people. The voting rights bill is good for people. Even the taking dark money out of the picture for politicians, you wouldn't necessarily feel that in your personal life, but that would have an immediate impact because it would so heavily affect Washington, D.C. and the kind of money they're able to take in from the anonymous donors. But that's the video for today. Thanks for watching. Please, if you liked the video, give me a like. If you've not subscribed, please give me a subscribe. Help me out as I try and grow this channel. And thanks for watching. Have a good day.